Hey, so in this video we will learn how to use JSON in your applications. We will be using ReteEditor, and we'll look into some examples how you can leverage our components to parse the data in the JSON itself and how to query the information. So what is JSON? And basically it's just a file type, right? It represents data in a very convenient and readable format. And here you see an example of a JSON. So this is a person.json that I've opened in Visual Studio Code, and it just describes one person, that is me, right? So we have a name, Matas, surname, Ubarevičius, height is 1.8, and the shirt is a size M. So you see that this is pretty readable, and it also indicates that we can represent strings, numbers, even nest objects deeper, and represent quite complex structures in this file format. So let's try and use this JSON in ReteEditor. There are many ways how to get JSON into BitByBit, like you can load it from the internet. In this case, we will just copy paste it to one of our components called text area. So what will happen is that we will be pasting it as a text, and I'll do this here. So select everything, Control C, and go here and do Control V. You'll see that we have a text now. And if you preview this data, so with the preview data component, you'll notice that it's not really yet a JSON that is valid. It's just a text, right, with all new line characters. So what we will do is we will go ahead and enter this JSON category, and we will parse this string. So let's do this like that. And now if we go to preview and look into this data, you'll see that it's all valid JSON. So with this, we could say that we want to get the name of a person and use it somehow in our code. So let's do that. Let's go again to this JSON category, and let's use this simple get value on property component. Let's put JSON in here, and let's say that we're interested in the name property. Now, if we go to the preview, you'll see that it shows up as Matas. And also, if we change that to surname, it will show Ubarevičius. And we can use that further, of course. Like we could maybe go ahead into advanced category and create 3D text like that, and then plug this data to a text component. And now if you see it in 3D, you'll notice that we have our data that comes from JSON. And here I'm quite free to say that maybe I'm interested in the name, and even the height you could do as well, but you will need to convert it to string. So let's do that. Let's get that height here. And you see that we have got 1.8 on the screen. And if you want to reach the deeper levels, you could go ahead and create another component to get another value. And now you will feed this one. So if we're interested in the shirt size, then you will say shirt in this component. Oh, typo. Shirt. And we're interested in the size. And now if we plug this into the text, you'll see that we have M on the screen. So this is the size of a shirt that I have. Okay, so far so good, right? It's maybe a bit cumbersome to create two components here when you just want sort of one property that is nested inside the other. And for that, we have a JSONPATH queries that you can use as well. These are more advanced ones. You can learn how to use them on the internet. The JSONPATH is a sort of standard for querying JSON. And here we could say $. So let's zoom in a little. Dot shirt dot size. And you'll see that if I preview this data, it will be a value of M. And we can also flatten this output, so we could use it in this component. And now we can just unplug whatever we have here, plug it in, and you'll see that we have still the M. And of course the same goes for the color. So if we change this to color now, you'll get blue. And this is quite simple. So parsing JSON is fun, and you can use that in many different ways, because JSON is used all over the place on the internet, right? So you can convert CSV data to JSON, you can import it that way. You can have something that someone else produces, or maybe you have another application that can export JSON. So this way you can then, go ahead and interpret that data. So now let's look into another example. And I have here another JSON that I've prepared for this tutorial, and it's called cylinders.json. And you see that it represents few cylinders, so 5 to be exact. In VS Code, you can just sort of close those as well to look into details and nest things and visualize things. But the important thing is that all of these cylinders have the same schema. So they all have labels, they all have radius, they all have height, they all have center positions, and they also have a label coordinate. So let's tap into those and let's rebuild some geometry out of this data. So this is pure text, right, and numbers, and let's make that into something that we could see on the screen in 3D. So I will just refresh this ReteEditor so it starts fresh. And now I will go ahead again and I'll create the text area component, make it just a little bit larger. I'll clone this text by hitting copy and paste. I will also parse this so that we have an actual JSON and not the string. And now if I preview this data, you'll see that I will have the thing that I have here in VS Code, right? So when we have this data, we want to get some parts of it. So for example, maybe we want to get all the heights of all the cylinders. And for that, we will be using JSONPATH component, and we will be writing a small query for that. And in this case, the magic lies in this syntax. So with $.dot, we can go into the cylinders and say that we are interested in the height. So let's put this JSON in this query. And now let's preview this data. Now you see that all of these heights are sitting in the array. To make it a little bit more useful for ourselves in this tutorial, I'll flatten this a little. So we have only one level of arrays here. And you see that it just collected everything in here. So first height is 1 that you see here in VS Code. Then the second height is 1.2. The third height is 0.2, and so forth. So this is quite cool. But how you can use it, you'll see just in a minute. Let's close this. So my goal is to recreate those cylinders, right, in 3D. And I will just collect all the data that I need for the cylinder component to function. And we can also just get the cylinder component here by typing cylinder. It's coming from OpenCascade technology kernel. And you see that we need radius, we need height, and I'll just use center positions as well. So these are all the things that we need to recreate cylinders. And we have a height already, but we also need to get the radius. Let's do that. So first thing is radius. So we do the same thing again, $.dot radius. And if we look into this data, see that it's there, and we can flatten it again as well. And yet another thing that we need is centers of all of these cylinders. So let's go ahead and say $.dot center. And let's again flatten this. Let's look into the data, and you see that we have the list of coordinates in here. So now if we want to create cylinders on all of these center points, given all those heights, we'll see that we want to map all of that data one-on-one in this component, and we will just pass this like this. So first goes the radius. Now let's put the heights in, and let's check the center points. And you will notice that in the background, in 3D space, we now have all those cylinders that we've got from the JSON format. So we wrote a small interpreter for JSON, and it just recreates the information from text in 3D. This is quite nice, but we also have additional information. So we have a label of each cylinder, right? And we have a label coordinate. So what we will do, we will use those as well to recreate 3D texts on each of those cylinders. And I will go ahead, I will copy paste this query, and we will copy paste this value. Now we will use label center, label coordinate. That's how I named it. So let's collect those. Let's look into the preview. We can delete those now. We're done with that part. So let's preview this data. You see that now I've got all the coordinates of all the labels, and I can flatten that a little. So with those coordinates, you can now go into this advanced category, text 3D, create 3D text. And let's make it somewhat smaller, maybe 0.3. Let's use a smaller height as well, so like that. And let's move that to the origin. And now you'll see that I've created BITBYBIT.DEV text on all of those cylinders, because those coordinates were just picked up, but the text of a label is yet to be computed. So let's go ahead and get the labels of all of those cylinders, and we just do exactly what we did before. We do $.label. And here, if you will look into this data, you'll see that we have all the labels. Let's flatten that. Let's also go into this component and let's tell it to compute 1-on-1, which will mean that it will pick the first cylinder 1 label, and it will pick the first label coordinate and map those together. It will do 1-on-1 mapping for these items. So let's go into this component now and plug it like that. And here we go. We've used JSON data, we queried it, and we've recreated 3D scene out of that. You see that the parsing is quite simple to implement, but it does require you to understand how those queries can be written into JSON. And you will just need to Google JSONPATH and you'll find how to use it online. So in this tutorial, we learn how to parse JSON, how to query the data out of it, how to recreate some geometry by using that data. And that was the goal of this lecture. So let's see each other in the next videos. Cheers.